let's get started talking about the rhetorical triangle and the foundation of argument. Before we jump into the triangle itself, let's talk about ethos, pathos, and logos. So these are the three argumentative appeals that Aristotle decided are the foundation of argument. We still use them today. You've probably heard about these in your class. Sometimes AP language we talk about ethos, pathos, logos too much, but sometimes we don't talk about them enough. They're very important. It's not about the terminology ethos, pathos, logos, but it's about the concept that every single argument uses all three. Think about it this way. Let's look at ethos in particular, and then let's talk about pathos and logos really briefly. Automatic ethos is first year AP teacher versus AP reader versus AP test creator. What I'm looking at is automatic. Before I open up a word, am I credible on the topic I'm talking about? A first year AP teacher is probably somewhat credible. They're an English teacher, they have licensure, etc., but they're not as credible as someone who's been through the AP reading experience and knows the ins and outs of the test. The person who's most credible here would be the AP test creator, the one who knows exactly what the answer is and how to get there. The way that most people build ethos as writers or develop ethos is building it. So that's our second type of ethos, building credibility within the work through mentioning of experience, relating to the audience, addressing counter argument, etc. So with all of that in mind, pathos is looking at your emotions or your audience's emotions and how would they look at the subject and how would they emotionally respond to your argument. And lastly, logos, how are you logically building an argument? Think of it as a three-pronged stool. What that means is that every solid argument has ethos, pathos, and logos working together to effectively communicate the purpose. Now, all of this is kind of relative unless you know what the subject is and who the audience is. But once you know who the speaker, audience, and subject are, ethos, pathos, and logos never go away this year. So even if we don't keep using them in terminology, we know the most effective arguments use all three parts of this pillar. All right, now it's time to jump into the rhetorical triangle. It's a very simple graphic here. Applying it well actually takes a lot of practice and nuance. So AP Langenkamp is all about practice. We can't cram for this test, which is why I'm so glad you're here with us today. We have to practice very deliberately every assignment that we do. So we're going to start that today, not just looking at the triangle simply, but how do we apply it no matter what the topic is. So the three aspects of the triangle are subject, audience, and speaker. With that said, what really this is about are how those three components are interrelated. So we're going to practice with a few prompts today, but let's just briefly walk through. So the subject's the easiest to identify. The subject is what the work is about, what the essay or the speech or the written assignment is about. Second is the audience. This is actually where we start to separate like mediocre analysis versus really strong analysis. Are people who can look at the targeted audience of the work and then look at the relationship between the subject and the audience. So I'm thinking, who is the audience of this work? Who's the intended audience? And how, what might they believe about the subject at hand? So if my audience is a 1960s American audience, I've got to put myself back in their shoes, in their perspective, and then think about what they would think about the subject. The last part is speaker. So this one, again, is really easy to identify, but what are we thinking about in terms of the relationship with the speaker and the audience? Do they know each other? Do they agree? Do they disagree? Does the audience kind of respect the speaker or not? And lastly, what's the connection with the speaker and the subject? Once I see connections between all three pieces of the triangle, I'm ready to analyze at a very high level.